Well, hello everyone. Welcome to, depending on how you look at it, either our very last episode of 2025 or our very, very first episode of 2026. This is Certified Forgotten. We're a long running, 5-year old horror podcast at this point. Typically, we talk about films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of times, we'll have an excellent guest. But sometimes we do these uncertified episodes, which is just me and my Certified Forgotten co founder, Matt Donato, having a good time talking about new releases, talking about films that haven't been released, aren't released, are in a questionable gray area of distribution, which is certainly the case in today's film. But we thought we would either end 2025 or begin 2026, however you want to look at it, on a high note to talk about a film that you've been mulling around for a really long time. This one's been kicking around in your head ever since South by Southwest. Is that correct?
That is indeed, and it's one of the last of the genre films of South by Southwest to really get picked up and, again, quote unquote, distributed. We'll get to that. But I've been a fan of It Ends, and I was really hoping that it would find a good home, and I believe it has in the dual platform release it is getting.
We're recording this episode in 2025. We are going to premiere this episode in 2026. And I feel like that's vaguely appropriate for It Ends because it is getting its weird letterbox distribution in 25, but its formal release in 2026. So I don't know. I think it's thematically on point with sort of the timelessness of the movie itself. But before we get into that, before we talk about our reactions to the film, let's do a really quick synopsis. It is, as of this recording, available for stream on Letterboxd, their new video store format, for $19.99. So if you have heard good things about it this year and you want to check it out, that's where you can go see. If you just want to dive in, quick plot synopsis for you. When a group of high school friends takes a wrong turn on their college road trip, there's not much to be worried about at first. So they missed a turnoff, big deal. They can double back and catch it in the other direction. But no matter how long the group drives, the turnoff never reappears. And soon the group finds themselves on an endless road chased by a horde of faceless people who seem to want their car. The debut feature from Alexander Ulam, It Ends is the director's attempt at finding a new way to look at the genre, something he's coined hangout horror for modern horror audiences. Donato, you saw this at South by. What was the buzz on the ground about this film?
The buzz was positive but divisive, as the film is. The way you've described it as hangout horror, hangout horror, I think, is a good descriptor of it. But in my mind, sometimes it's like I kind of use hangout horror to describe a horror movie that you want to kind of have a jokey time with your friends with, like a pizza and beer kind of movie. I describe it as, and the way that he's describing hangout horror of this film, it's a road trip drama for a lot of the time until it becomes this shape-shifty 28 days later kind of spin-off with these just hordes of things running towards a car. But it's also an endless loop, and it's also just pure existential dread. So I don't know if this is exactly hangout horror in the way that some people might assume. So I just want to preface and put the warning out there that hangout horror, I think, is describing what the characters are doing. This is very in the vein of The Battery or the Christmas horror movie Dead End, where a lot of it's travel, a lot of it's chatter between main characters, protagonists. But I do think it's done well here, and I think it's done in a way that sustains a narrative that may not feel like it has a beginning or an end, but it does. It has both of those. The journey just kind of feels like an infinite, and it's got everything. But I don't know, like it all just kind of swirls together in a way that didn't hit people the right way. And I'm happy to be on the high end of it. Isn't really kind of my kind of film, maybe on paper, but I don't know, the existential mortality of just getting stuck in your head and those thoughts where you are and where they can go. I think that's everything that kind of hit me on It Ends.
Yeah, in an interview around the time that the film came out, Ulam did an interview with Filmmaker magazine, and he talks about the fact that the way that the film is structured is intentional, and that when he says hangout horror, it's sort of he uses that to describe the fact that it gets less horror-y the further the film goes on. His quote is, "I have a good attention span, but I found that in a lot of typical horrors, by the third act, I have a level of desensitization to the sound, rhythm, and cuts of a movie. Those genre tricks are less effective after I've been accustomed to the theater and what's been going on for the last hour. So I definitely wanted to play with expectations. The movie desperately relies on that. I could compare this a little bit to a film like The Battery, right? I think you'd agree with me that this has a strong battery vibes, people in a car. That last 20 minutes or 15 minutes of The Battery in particular is playing in the same thematic and conceptual end of the horror pool as this. But I do think that what It Ends does, to Willem's point about the structure of the film, is it goes in the opposite direction. If a film like The Battery is about characters starting out, fatigued and a little bit annoyed, and then building to this place of breakdown and existential dread, this movie kind of works in reverse. Like, they're pretty aware pretty quickly that something's fucked up and that they're stuck in a situation they don't want to be in. And then it's sort of about the long term coping mechanisms. And we'll talk about some of those plot points and strategies of the film as it gets there. But it's sort of a horror film in reverse. And I think that that is part of why I responded so favorably to it is exactly to the director's point about the place where I normally find myself saying, "All right, I've seen what you're able to do. Like, I've got, I'm starting to anticipate the movement of your film, the rhythm of your film. You've switched gears on me. You're doing something different." And so now I'm in a completely different stream of consciousness and thought than I was before. I liked this a lot. I don't know if this would work, if you were anything other than sort of a first feature experimental $50,000 film. But for this film, this audience, this cast, I think it's a really good construction.
It's a movie that tests limits, and that's not just on the screen because, as you said, very quickly, we know that something is not right. 4 kids in a car driving somewhere, and shit goes wrong. And the shit that goes wrong is a never-ending highway. And the way that is a metaphor for life, and the way that is a metaphor for anxiety and all this stuff, it's very clear. But the way I say that, like, it tests limitations is that, number one, the movie's trying to break its characters. It is pushing everyone to the point where they finally give up along the road. Number two, I think that kind of plays doubly so with the audience, because how long can you go along with the vibe? I think that is the question that the movie asks. It's a little like The Long Walk in that way, where, okay, how can we sustain a perpetual motion film that is continually moving forward and has clear stakes, but it is just one march toward inevitability? And I think with The Long Walk being, propelled, I think it's propelled by camaraderie and acting, and a really kind of hit you in the face sense of death and what that means. It ends is a little less of the it's a little less on, like, the gore. It's a little less on the violence. It's not The Long Walk in that way. And it super emphasizes the relationships between the 4 characters in the car. And a conversational horror, very Benson and Moorhead at times. I think that's where it really does its best work, because the horrors that are unfolding are like societal horrors, they're social horrors, they are friendship horrors, how people change, and the people finally reach that point and what happens. And all of that said, like, I think it does a good job in the end when we get to that moment, that we're not gonna, like, spoil and shit like that, but when the movie is over and we hit the credits, I was happy to walk away and go, the experiment was fulfilled. I think this is one of those instances where a young filmmaker is doing something out there and wild. And once you get there, I see what he was going for. Like, I see the message he was trying to deliver, and it might not fulfill other people who need the James Wan approach to the Conjuring type of horror, like, bumps in the night, monsters, all that stuff. But I don't know, like, when I'm looking for a different flavor and I'm looking for alternative horror, this is in my wheelhouse. And I also think Neon is a great partner for this. I think this is a very neon coded film. And the minute it was actually announced that, Letterboxd would do the initial run with their new video store component, and we all sat there going, okay, what does this mean? Like, is Letterboxd going to be the distro now? Like, this is technically its premiere. You can rent it for $20 through Letterboxd. What's that going to mean for distributors? In my mind, I was a little nervous, because I was like, okay, I know distributors who would look at that Letterboxd model as the premiere and lose interest because, okay, well, people that's part of our market gone already. People have seen it already, and that's letterbox's stuff. But for Neon to swoop in and say, no, we're going to give it a full theatrical rollout, it's almost like Letterbox is operating as a mini film festival in this way, where sure, if you want to buy the ticket, you can see an early run of it, or you could just wait until it has its full rollout. And I'm really curious to see how this model works in tandem now, knowing that movies can go to Letterbox and get full distro, and what that means for returns, let's say.
It's the kind of thing I'd love to have our friend James Shapiro's thoughts on. And, and he did. He wrote a little bit about it for our publication for Certified Forgotten. But it's funny, we have this conversation, and about an hour ago, I got an email from my friends at Sony Pictures Publicity. I'm sure you did as well, where they were touting their hashtag the leak screenings of 28 years later, the Bone Temple. These are advanced screenings that are happening in select cities. They're advertised as exclusive screenings, and they're only available to a handful of places. And they're part of like this pre-release thing that they're doing. And part of me thinks that if there is, for it ends for films like this, I do wonder if the industry is changing in regards to how that area between the first time that it shows theatrically and when it shows up on video, how much that really matters anymore. And if there are distributors that are willing to take kind of like, a long-term unconventional look at it, right? Because like Letterbox isn't going to have the streaming rights for this forever. Once it's off of Letterbox Windows, once Neon does the actual release, if anybody wants to go rent it for $3.99 from Apple or from Amazon or something in a year's time, that is going to be money that goes to Neon, who signed it and has the rights to it. But I am curious to see if this is more the beginning than the end of people fucking with the theatrical window and saying, if this is going to be the way that it's going to be, then we can do stuff like this. We can have a film that has a premiere date, has all the like US premiere, North American premiere, New York City and LA premiere, all of those hierarchies of premieres that people care about. And then once you bottom out and you're sort of in the Juneau, Alaska premiere, no, nothing premieres in my hometown. That's kind of, you get to a point where they're like Charlotte premiere, and you're like, all right, do we still need to celebrate these? I feel like there are ways for us to say before it's available in its permanent long-term format, we can have a premium format that it's available just to folks that want to sign up, or just to folks that are interested in getting it in this window. And I'll say I did not see it at South by Southwest. I did not see it at any of the festivals that it showed at. I did rent it on Letterbox for $19.99, which was a very seamless experience because they partnered with Vimeo to handle the back end. So it's a very clean stream with no issues. You don't need to worry about checkpoints or save points for it or bookmarks or anything like that. And if this is the kind of thing that we get, then I'm like, hey, this does not feel like a subpar viewing experience for me. So if the distributor's on board, if the filmmakers are on board, if there's just this window where we can build an additional level of hype for the film and the filmmakers, maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's, because to talk about the theatrical release window, I do think we've already reduced it as much as we should. And my opinion is that the theatrical window is shorter than it should be because it's inevitably eating into ticket sales. People know now that if the Black Phone 2 is in theaters, they can wait a month and it's on VOD.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I see this as, like, I see it like you said, like it's an adaptation to the theatrical window because technically it's not theatrical. Like It Ends hit Letterboxd, I think, before Neon even announced its partnership to do a full
Yeah.
distribution. So yeah, like I see this version as being somewhat okay because it's replacing the exclusivity of a film festival, and it's giving people the option to see it early for that ticket price that, maybe even cheaper than a film festival because, you want to buy a Fantastic Fest badge. Hey, there's a couple $100 gone right there.
Right.
Where with this, it's offering it to anyone who does want to see it. And I think of like Skinamarink. Here's the thing. Piracy is bad. I'm just going to say that up front. But I'm also going to say that if Skinamarink did not go viral on TikTok, it never would have been as popular it was with Shudder. Like, Shudder was absolutely correct. They snagged that and they had that viral marketing and they parlayed that into something special in theaters. Like, did the movie break like box office records? Of course not. But for Shudder and for the attention that it did end up getting, like, that did help it. I guess it's my hope that Letterbox kind of works as the same way, but now you're also giving money at least to the creators and the people putting it out there. So if it works in that kind of function where it ends, inspires people to watch it on Letterbox and then talk about it more, and that generates traffic and hype for later, absolutely. The only thing that worries me is that theatrical experience being robbed, and this becoming one more barrier to entry because, well, I can just watch it on Letterbox before it even has distribution. Why would I even care about doing it
Yeah.
later? And it's an evolution. We have to evolve. It's there. Lockdown changed everything and it introduced in-home viewing, and now that people have it, they want more of it. I just think it's an unfortunate, maybe, I don't want to say like this is a good example, but it's an unfortunate situation because we have a good example that people can now latch onto. And there are a lot of people that still don't understand how important the theatrical model is to Hollywood itself.
Right.
And all these people saying fuck theaters, it's the worst, and the smaller the window the better. Yeah, you're not going to like the outcome of that. Like, that's just, I hate to say that, and I've had that conversation online recently, and it's just like trying to hammer that home. We need some kind of symbiotic relationship. We don't need to kill the window, and that's my little rant.
And there's been a bunch of stuff written. I think it was either Variety or Hollywood Reporter did a piece over the summer about how what's been saving Hollywood or saving distribution in a very real sense is reprogrammed, like repertory screenings, getting big windows with an AMC, with a Regal, something like an anniversary movie showing for 2 weeks rather than the one night exclusive that they used to do. So the optimist in me wants to think that maybe what we're seeing is an evolution of the theatrical window where it's not one direction, where it isn't movie theaters to small screen. It could now be small screen to movie theaters to back to small screen, or some kind of an encouragement that recognizes that people, maybe the preferred movie behavior in 5 years' time is people will vet stuff on the small screen, and what they really like, they'll pay a premium to go back and see on the big screen with a like-minded crowd. I don't know. I would like to be hopeful about that. I don't feel hopeful about that. I am now, I love Philadelphia. I'm so happy to live in Philadelphia. I miss the Draft House. I miss having audiences that were aligned on the sanctity of the theatrical experience. So nothing's going to change on my end. I'll just grin and bear it a little bit. But, I guess to your point, and to get back to the film at hand, it's a good thing that they did this with a film like this first, because here we are debating whether or not this is going to sustain itself because of the quality of the film and the fact that it's the right budget and it doesn't need a lot to break even. I mean, it's alleged to have a $50,000 budget for the feature. So, like, it's all house money for the filmmakers, for the distributors, for everybody up and down the line. And at least people, like, at the end of the day, anybody who wants to see it in whatever format they want to see it, they're going to get a chance to see it, which is good. This is a good, we're it's a lots of blessings, bestowed upon it ends. We're talking about the right way to do it when there's no wrong way to do it. It would be different if the movie sucked. It's just going to put it out there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, this is a good gamble movie because it is a gamble, and it's going to have its lovers and it's going to have its haters. But, sticking with the film itself, going back to the quartet of the actors playing the people in the car trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Um, I I think this is a really strong ensemble of young talent that comes together in a way that shows just how different people are when they are thrust into survival scenarios, and showing like the different ways, like, so Tyler's played by Mitchell Cole, James is played by Phineas Yoon, Day is Akira Jackson, and Fisher is Noah Toth. And like, it's hard to single out any one of them because I really do think there's a lot going on here. Like, Ulam is basically like conducting a social experiment by subjecting characters to nebulous threats without reason. That's what I wrote in my review, and I think that still holds strong thinking about the film. And like the way you have the science brained James trying to formulate an answer to what's happening, or you have Day that is just so honest and open about her feelings and what's happening in a way that is like sometimes off-putting to people, but at the same time, like, that's just how she copes. or you have the funny man, or you have the silent type. Like putting them all in the same car and having them deal with the same scenario their own ways, I think is just a really good examination of personalities and how to work together and how relationships form and how like you can be different, but at the same time like that acceptance of having to understand what works best for you and understand that like it's the individuality is going to like save yourself despite what other people are doing, and all of that comes together in a good road trip way, because not only are they stuck in the car, but they're stuck in the car forever. And they
Mhm.
eventually realize that. Like they come to terms with that in their own points. And the movie is divided by them coming to terms with it. Like every character's epiphany is like a new chapter. And it's just really interesting to get to the human basic instinct of it all. And I think in another movie, it wouldn't be that interesting. There would just be the monster chasing them, or there would be this or that. There would be a cut and dry reason. But the thing about It Ends is there is no reason. It just keeps adapting as they reach a new milestone, as the odometer goes higher and higher. Like there is a new occurrence, and that is also smart. I think keeps us on our
Yeah.
toes, keeps us going. So this is a movie of unknowns, and you have to be okay with that. Like that's the thing. If that's not your vibe, that's going to be a problem. But if you can just roll with every punch and watch something that maybe has rules but it doesn't give a fuck about them, that's It Ends.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have never seen a film before. I've seen a lot of films made by young people. I've seen a lot of films starring young people. I've never seen a film where as acutely felt a generational divide as I did with It Ends. In that same interview with filmmaker, Ulam talks a bit about, it's a pandemic film. It was shot during and after, and there's a lot of work. And I just we've seen versions of this movie, right? Like we've seen, you mentioned the Benson and Moorhead, right? Millennials for a long time were God's perfect idiot. We had the horrible origin story, and we were the ones that were emerging in our 20s into a world that had done us wrong, and we had a very distinct reaction and anger towards that. And I think there's something profound, I'll say profound, about It Ends and the way that it presents a group of young people who have never known anything other than existential horror, right? Like the filmmaker and the film are they're clear that these are characters who have lived through just the societal times that we have. There's a lot of bad shit happening, and you don't get to have a big dramatic cataclysmic ending for most of us. Like we get up and we find out something terrible has happened almost every single day, and we just have to like go do our job, go hang out with our people, like go do our freelance, whatever else it is. And I feel like Gen Z has embodied that in such a unique way, having been the pandemic generation, having been the social media generation, and just being confronted by the horrors every single day and being asked to continue with it. I feel like our generation makes a movie like this, and the ending is bleak, or it pulls the rug out underneath, and it's like it shows that the terror of it all. But there was something about It Ends, which is basically like, this is just going to continue exactly as it is forever. And these characters are like, okay, shit, I guess we got to make the most of it. And that's a really uplifting story. Like it is a bittersweet story that a group of young people in their early 20s have been through enough shit in the real world that when faced with eternity, their attitude is sort of like, okay, this is just one more thing. That is that gives this movie such important legs. It's something I want people to write about. It's something I want people to study. It is just like a titan of Gen Z cinema, I think.
Yeah, bringing up the pandemic filming of it all. I was just talking recently on my live stream with Perry, and we were going with our favorite movies of the year. And I highlighted Grand Theft Hamlet and kind of saying, there were a lot of movies right after the pandemic that tried to capture that horror and that dread, and not only that, but the feeling of being trapped inside and that feeling of being in lockdown. And I think Grand Theft Hamlet is my favorite film to come out of all of that. Not a horror movie at all. It's a documentary about
Mhm.
some theater kids, or theater men and women who were in lockdown and wanted some happiness and tried to put on Hamlet in Grand Theft Auto. great little documentary to go watch. It's really touching. It's really moving. And I think it captured everything that we were going through during the lockdown and put it to screen in a way that is so unique and inviting, but also just so emotionally felt. Same thing here, I think, with It Ends and having it be a reaction to everything and having it be, you're stuck inside with people. Maybe you weren't, maybe you were stuck alone, but for those who might have had a family or roommates or something like that, I think It Ends is also a fantastic exploration of the feelings that were being felt during a time when there were no answers and there was nothing we knew beyond the next day, and we just had to sit with that and we had to just stew on it. So calling this like, in the pantheon of pandemics, no, I do think this also ranks pretty high. I wasn't even thinking about it like that at first, but now that you mentioned that, like, this is a pretty fucking good representation of all of those ups and downs, let's say.
Yeah, I pulled up on the other screen just so I could remember myself. It's that meme from a few years ago that is the somehow we ended up here, and it's the Venn diagram of the apocalypse, and we have to go to work. This film, I think, captures that better than any other film. And especially to bring the conversation back all the way to the beginning, it's because it flips the script. It's because it becomes more mundane the longer it goes on, because nothing can remain, terrible and horrific and scary forever. Eventually you just sort of acclimate. That's the beauty and the horror of being human. So, I love that you brought up Grand Theft Hamlet again, because I know the moment you walked out of that movie, you've been shouting about that film for like 2 years now. But yeah, I don't know. I think that this is I was very into this movie while I was watching it, and I haven't stopped thinking about it in the 24 hours since. And I think this movie is a tiny, tiny little zeitgeist in and of itself, like both in terms of what it represents from a distribution practice, the generational shift in, taking the Benson and Moorheads and the Shane Carruths and recontextualizing that intellectual anxiety existential thriller for a new generation. I just think there's a lot here. And whether it's on Letterboxd or in a movie theater or on streaming, I really, really hope people have an opportunity to experience it.
Yeah, it is a generational film, and I think it's going to speak to a younger generation louder, let's say, but it's still universally understood. I think it's something
Mhm.
that, while it will represent a very generational approach and existentialism, anyone watching this movie is going to be able to clue into the dread that is palpable. Like, it's just, I go back to the time loop of it all, and all these movies that try to keep you in a time loop, and it just doesn't stay engaging. It doesn't do the right things. It just kind of goes through the motions of being a time loop movie. This found a way to be a time loop movie without the loop. Like,
Yeah.
it found a way just to be time, which
Yeah.
sounds fucking crazy to say out loud. But it really did crack the code on a bunch of formulas that I wasn't expecting it to. And I don't know, everyone's talking about the weapons run this year, but there's some pretty startling stuff here with running people.
Yes. Well, and let's end with the most important question of all: 50 Hawks or one guy with a gun. Donato, which would you take in their never-ending car argument as to whether you would rather have fighting on your side 50 Hawks or one guy with a gun?
Fuck, that is. Like, I mean, if they're really well trained hawks and they are aggressive, like, I'm probably gonna take the 50 hawks. That's super disorienting. That's animalistic, man. One guy with a gun, sure. You've got so many shots and you got to reload. I'm going 50 hawks.
I hate to end this episode on a moment of agreement, but I agree. It's the 50 Hawks every time. So there you go. Watch the film, listen to their argument, but know that Donato and I are right. It's Hawks every time. That does it. That is our conversation on It Ends. It is available on Letterbox Video Store for the time being. Can't give you anything more concrete than that, but it will be getting at least a limited release in 2026. So if you live in one of those cities that tends to get movies like this, you're going to have a chance to immerse yourself fully in the car with these four friends. Donato, this is our first or last podcast of the year. So how do folks stay connected with you in the new year? You've got a lot going on. I've already seen a glimpse at your dance card, and it's starting to fill up already. So there's a lot happening in the land of Matanato. Where do folks connect to you?
I'm still trying to plan Sundance, man. I'll be there. Be there pretty quickly, in fact, and that is dreadful enough. But yeah, you can follow me at Donatobomb, DonatoBomb, and that is, as always, mostly Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram. So I'll keep you up to date as I keep working. That's not going to stop, I don't think, anytime soon. So lots of reviews, lots of editorials. Hey, I might be writing about Blood Rain for Inverse. Who knows?
That sounds like fun. As for myself, you can follow me. I'm mostly just on Blue Sky. It's Monagle at the Blue Sky stuff. I am on Instagram. I use it a little bit. And I'm going to pull a Matt Donato in here and say I'm thinking about getting serious on TikTok at some point, just because it never hurts to have more tape of you as a film critic talking about the movies that you like. So we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. Regardless, though, you should definitely visit certifiedforgotten.com, particularly certifiedforgotten.com/newsletter. Sign up for our weekly newsletter, get updates from us about what's going on in our world, what articles we have published, what maybe some stuff from the archives we think you would like. And if you love what you saw and you want to support independent film criticism, you can hit that subscribe button right at the very top of certifiedforgotten.com. Until then, rest in piss 2025. Here's to 2026. Hey, it can't be worse.
Don't fucking jinx this.